everything's coming up aces right now for Trevor Lawrence, right?
100%. I mean, you look at it, and he might have, I don't know the best receiving core in football, but probably in the top 7 or 8 at worst, when you just look at the whole group and if they're able to play to their potential, because now Zay Jones goes from the 2 to the 3, and you have hopefully what Calvin Ridley can become. And again, if he looks fantastic in camp and, everything is trending in the right direction, which today was the first step, then I will put Ridley ahead of Christian Kirk, but they'll be close. I think it's an unbelievable group, and he certainly took the strides that you wanted to see with a better coaching staff and how he developed as the season went on. I hope to see more of Travis Etienne in the backfield as well. But, this is a team that has an opportunity to be one of the better offenses. It's one of the better play callers. I do like the report. I'm sure Heath likes it as well, that Doug Peterson was giving Andy Reid some crap about stealing his plays in the Super Bowl. The 2 touchdown plays to Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. He said, he stole them from me. So, I think Doug Peterson is going to just continue to unlock the potential of Trevor Lawrence. And now the receiving core is, again, as good as you can find. So, he's now in that, potential top 5 group. I don't think anyone's going to draft him as a top 5 guy, but, number 6, number 7, he's right there in terms of fantasy quarterbacks.
Dave, you're on team Calvin Ridley over Christian Kirk, right?
He averaged 14 PPR points per game in 2021. He didn't play that whole season. The year before that, 18.5 PPR points per game. Mind you, he was sharing for chunks of those season with Julio Jones. He was top 6 in targets per game, top 24 in PPR points per game in 2020 and 2021. The only way he doesn't, I don't know about the top 6 in targets, but he's going to get a lot of targets. The only way he doesn't come through is as at least a good fantasy wide receiver is if there's just too many mouths to feed in Jacksonville. And that's got to be a consideration to a degree, because they've got Kirk, they've got Zay. Evan Ingram's going to be back. Jamie talked about Travis Etienne. Maybe he catches a few more passes out of the backfield. But I think this is going to be a pass-heavy offense again. Trevor Lawrence was 7th in pass attempts overall and top 10 in yardage, top 10 in touchdowns. He's got that touchdown rate that could go up a little bit more. I like where that can go. And the deep rate could go up a lot more. And I think Ridley can fill those roles and help not only just be like the number 1 receiver for Jacksonville, but help them attack further downfield.
Yeah, Heath, were you going to say something? Because, Dave, I would like you to address also Ridley versus Kirk, because I understand what you're saying about Ridley. But, Heath, go ahead and discuss that. Because
I don't think that's the only. I just think we have to also accept the possibility that Calvin Ridley might not be who he was 2 years ago. And he definitely might not be that guy for the first half of the season. We just saw Deshaun Watson, who was one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, look like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL the second half of last year. So it's possible that Ridley is exactly who he was. But he's, 28 years old and hasn't played football for almost 2 years by the time the season starts. If he's who he was, then I definitely think he'll be better than Christian Kirk. I think there's a pretty big difference between the best of Calvin Ridley and the best of Christian Kirk. But Kirk already has the year rapport with Trevor Lawrence, and Ridley has a lot of unknowns around him right now.
All that's true, except for one thing. When Deshaun Watson went to Houston or to Cleveland, he was there for a while. He was there for training camp, and then he couldn't be with the team for like the first 10 weeks of the season, something like that. So I don't know what that kind of did to him. Calvin Ridley can go to the Jaguars building today. He can go into his locker. He could put his, his clothes in there, his cleats in there, and he can start throwing with the team. He'll be a part of their OTAs. He'll be a part of their training camp. So I'm less worried about that, but that is something that we do have to keep in mind. So let's see what he looks like when training camp comes around. Let's see what the reports are like. Maybe we'll catch a glimpse of him in a preseason game. For now, I've got him as a low-end number 2 wide receiver, banking on him getting back to a degree of where he was in Atlanta. It's not the exact same role, but I still think he's got a chance to outperform that, which is why I'm happy to take him in early round 5. Christian Kirk, I also have as a number 3 receiver. I don't hate Christian Kirk. I'd just rather have Ridley because I think he's got more upside.
I think if you're looking at it from what the ceiling could be for both, based on where they'll play, to me, Kirk is Godwin and Ridley's Evans. I think Kirk will end up having more targets and more receptions. I think Ridley will be more of a downfield threat and have more yards and hopefully more touchdowns. I think both could be very successful. Both could be very good fantasy options. But I think based on where Kirk will line up, based on as he said, the rapport that those guys have already established, I think the targets and catches should favor Kirk. It's just a matter of who will find the end zone more and who will be racking up more yards.
Does that make him less explosive on a per catch basis, James?
I mean, I don't really care about that for fantasy. I think, from the perspective of who'll be more explosive, it should be Ridley. So,
Right.
if he's Ridley, and again, there is that risk of, what kind of player were they trading for and what kind of player were the Falcons giving up? Now, there's a lot of escalators in terms of what the incentives will be. If he gets a new contract, plays a full season, there's it could go from a 5th round pick to a 2nd round pick. So obviously the Falcons are hoping that he's still a successful enough player that they're going to get some pretty significant compensation in return, and the Jaguars get the player that they're hoping for. So I think it was a great gamble on both sides, but the Falcons giving up on such still a relatively young talent, for the off-field transgression, which I think we all would agree is very minor, is a little bit somewhat of a concern, because again, what are you giving up to get back in return? And so there's a lot that still has to get back to Atlanta, I think, to make this trade what they hope it can be. So I still hope, again, he's that type of player and he can prove it.
And I just have to, in my continued fight against Eric Bieniemy erasure, Doug Peterson, Eric Bieniemy stole those plays from you and was the one who suggested him the night before the Super Bowl, according to Chet Henne. He just doesn't get credit for anything.
Well, I think Andy Reid told Eric Bieniemy Trevor Lawrence, by the way, were they pass heavy? What interesting trend here. Only 25 touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence. They were 16th in pass rate for the season, but when they got close to the end zone, that pass rate went down. They were 20th in red zone pass rate, 23rd in green zone pass rate, 21st in pass rate inside the 5-yard line. So I'd like to see Trevor Lawrence with a few more pass attempts near the end zone. That's definitely something. I looked at the 5 years that Doug Peterson was in Philadelphia. It was an inconsistent thing. Some years 26th in pass rate inside the 5-yard line. A couple years he was 7th. So I would expect more pass attempts near the end zone for Trevor Lawrence next year. Just law of averages, I think he'll go up.